All right, so if you're listening to this, you're probably at least a little bit curious about what's happening at the cutting edge of AI and robotics, right? And guess what? OpenAI, those folks behind those mind-blowing language models, well, they're making a pretty big move.
Yeah, they're getting back into robots.
That's right, back into robots. Which is kind of surprising, right? I mean, didn't they just shut down their whole robotics division a few years back, like 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Back then, OpenAI was laser focused on large language models, and they kind of felt like robotics was, well, a bit premature,
Yeah, they were all about the software side of things. Plus, I remember them mentioning something about data limitations being a big roadblock.
Right. Data was definitely a concern back then. But now, well, things seem to be changing. There's this article in the Decoder that suggests they're jumping back into robotics headfirst.
No kidding. So it's changed.
Yeah.
Why the sudden comeback?
Well, one thing that really jumps out is this pretty aggressive hiring spree they've got going on. They're looking for a robotics mechanics engineer, an electronic sensing engineer, and get this, even a technical project manager. It's like they're building a whole new team, totally from scratch.
It definitely sounds like they're gearing up for something big. And the language they're using in the article is pretty bold, too. They're talking about creating the next generation of embodied AI and pushing towards AGI-level intelligence. I mean, wow, that's ambitious, even for OpenAI.
Yeah, no kidding. Embodied AI is a really key concept here. It basically refers to robots that can, actually interact with the real world, not just exist in simulations.
So we're not just talking about robots that can move around and stuff. We're talking about robots that can learn from their environment, adapt to new situations, solve problems in real time. I mean, that's a pretty big leap from what we've seen before, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole new level of complexity. Think about it. Robots that can navigate complex environments, maybe assist in really delicate surgeries, or even explore hazardous areas for us.
Wow. The possibilities are pretty much endless. But why now? What's changed since 2020? You think maybe they realized a software-only approach just wasn't going to cut it for achieving AGI?
Yeah, that's one possibility. Maybe they hit a wall with their software models and realized that to get to true AGI, they needed to bring physical robots into the equation. Or, hey, maybe they found ways to overcome those data limitations that were holding them back before.
Yeah, good point. Could it be that they've figured out how to use synthetic data or figured out how to use simulations more effectively to train their robots?
That's definitely possible. But let's not forget the business side of things either. Generative AI, the kind of tech behind those impressive chatbots we see these days, well, that could totally revolutionize robotics. Imagine robots that can actually understand complex instructions, learn from experience, and adapt to new situations, all powered by generative AI.
That's a really interesting angle. Can you give us like a real-world example of how that might work?
Sure, think about a manufacturing plant, right? You could have robots that not only, assemble products, but they can also troubleshoot problems, optimize workflows, and even design new products based on real-time data they're gathering. That's the kind of transformative potential we're talking about here.
It's amazing to think about. And it seems like they're not just building these robots in a lab somewhere. The article mentions a partnership they have with Figure AI.
Figure AI, right?
Yeah. Which is a robotics company that's already testing OpenAI-powered robots in actual BMW factories.
That's right, in real-world settings.
Which suggests that OpenAI is really serious about getting these robots out there and doing real work from the very beginning.
Oh, definitely. It's a clear sign that they're not just interested in, theoretical advancements. They want to see these robots making a real, tangible impact in various industries.
That makes sense. And if they're already in factories, it makes you wonder where else we might see these robots popping up. Could this be the beginning of something much, much bigger? Like, are we on the verge of robots becoming just a regular part of our everyday lives?
It's a fascinating question. I mean, think about it. We're already seeing robots in warehouses, hospitals, even restaurants, right? So yeah, I think it's a real possibility. OpenAI's push into this embodied AI could really accelerate that trend.
That's both exciting and a little bit, I don't know, maybe even a little bit intimidating to think about. But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities, maybe we should take a step back for a second and think about their previous success with,
Dactyl.
That robot hand that solved a Rubik's Cube a while back. I think it was 2019.
Yeah, that was pretty groundbreaking. I remember that. It really showed everyone that AI could bridge that gap between simulations and real-world tasks, especially when it comes to dexterity and problem solving.
Exactly. It was a huge deal. And that was 5 years ago. Think about it. Imagine how much more sophisticated their robots could be now. I mean, the speed of development in AI has just been incredible over the past few years.
Oh, it's been mind-blowing. And with this renewed focus on robotics, who knows what they'll be able to achieve? It's a pretty exciting time to be following this field. A little daunting, maybe, but exciting.
It really makes you think about what the world might look like in 5, 10 years. What will the world look like when robots are capable of doing even more than they can do now?
It's a question we should all be thinking about. And that's exactly what we're going to be exploring further in this deep dive. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a closer look at what this whole move by OpenAI might mean for the broader AI landscape.
Sounds good. So let's shift gears a bit and zoom out to the bigger picture. What does OpenAI's return to robotics tell us about the state of AI as a whole?
Well, to me, it really highlights a couple of key trends. First, it just shows how incredibly fast the field of AI is evolving. Things that seemed impossible just a few years ago are now becoming reality. And second, I think it points to this growing convergence between AI and robotics. Two fields that were once pretty separate, but they're becoming more and more intertwined.
So we're seeing a kind of merging of these two incredibly powerful technologies, and OpenAI is right there leading the charge. And with companies like Figure AI already putting these robots to work in real-world settings, it seems pretty clear that this tech is poised to have a massive impact across tons of industries.
Oh, without a doubt. And as we dive deeper into this, I think we'll also need to think about the implications for, everything, really. Jobs, the economy, even for our understanding of what it means to be human in a world where robots are becoming more and more capable.
Whoa, that's a lot to unpack. So I think we need to pause here for a moment. We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the world of AI and robotics after a quick break. Okay, so we've talked about OpenAI jumping back into the robotics game, and it's definitely raising a lot of questions about where things are headed.
For sure. And one thing's for sure, we're not talking about robots doing just simple tasks anymore. This is about robots that can actually learn, adapt, maybe even make decisions on their own,
Wow. That brings up a really interesting point. If robots are becoming more autonomous like that, what does that mean for human control? Will we always be able to predict or even understand how these robots are going to behave?
Yeah, that's a huge question. Researchers and ethicists, they're wrestling with this right now. As AI systems get more complex, it gets really hard to trace how they make decisions. It's almost like, trying to understand the human brain.
So there's this inherent unpredictability that comes with more sophisticated AI, and that could be kind of unsettling for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, I think it's natural to have concerns. I mean, we're talking about machines that could have a big impact on our lives, so it's really important to be open and honest about all of this as we move forward.
Absolutely. We can't ignore the economic side of things either. If robots are able to do jobs that humans used to do, what does that mean for the workforce?
It's a valid concern. Some jobs, they'll definitely be automated. But, if you look back, history shows us that new technologies often create new opportunities, too.
So it's not necessarily a robots take over the world situation. It's more like we need to adapt and find new ways for humans and robots to, work together.
Right, exactly. Think about it. Robots could be doing dangerous jobs, repetitive stuff, or super specialized tasks, and that frees up humans to focus on more creative things, strategy, things that involve relationships,
So robots could be our collaborators, not replacements, basically helping us achieve things we couldn't do on our own.
That's the idea. Finding the right balance, leveraging what both humans and machines are good at.
This all kind of ties back to that whole AGI-level intelligence thing that OpenAI keeps mentioning. Could these robots be the key to actually unlocking that next level of AI, do you think?
It's possible. Remember, AGI, that's about AI being able to do any intellectual task that humans can. And one of the biggest hurdles to getting there is bridging that gap between the virtual world and the real world.
Right. It's not just about thinking like a human. It's about being able to act and interact with the world like we do.
And that's where robots come in. By creating robots that can learn from the physical world, adapt to it, we might learn things that help us create more general purpose AI.
It's crazy how these two fields, AI and robotics, they're almost feeding off each other, pushing each other forward.
It's a symbiotic relationship, yeah. AI breakthroughs lead to robotics innovation, and the challenges in robotics push for new breakthroughs in AI.
This whole idea of embodied AI is starting to click for me now.
Yeah.
It's not just about building robots. It's about using them as a tool to understand intelligence itself.
Yeah, you got it. It's a totally different way of thinking about AI. Instead of trying to create minds stuck in computers, we're realizing how important having a physical body is.
So we're going from AI that can only think to AI that can think, act, and experience the world in a more human-like way.
It's a bold vision, and OpenAI seems pretty committed to it. Who knows, maybe it'll lead us to a future where robots aren't just tools or machines, but more like partners.
Partners, wow, that's an interesting word. Does that suggest a future where robots are part of our lives on a much deeper level?
Well, think about some scenarios. Imagine robots helping with elder care, providing companionship, maybe even helping us explore space. These are just a few ways robots could become really important parts of our lives.
It's exciting, but it also raises some big questions about our relationship with these robots. Will they always be tools, or could they become something more?
That's a question that goes beyond science and engineering. It's philosophical, too. As robots get more advanced and integrated into our lives, we're going to have to face questions about ethics, responsibility, even consciousness.
It's a lot to think about, and we're just scratching the surface. But one thing's clear, this journey into AI and robotics is going to be fascinating.
And it's a journey we're all taking together. The choices we make today are shaping the future of this tech and how it impacts our world.
That's a powerful thought. Okay, so we've talked about a lot here. OpenAI's moved back into robotics, the idea of embodied AI, what it could mean for jobs, even the philosophical implications of smarter and smarter machines.
We've looked at the potential benefits, the challenges, the big questions that are still out there. It's a complex and constantly changing landscape, but it's definitely full of possibilities.
It seems like every step forward in AI opens up even more questions and possibilities.
Yeah.
That's what makes this so interesting, right? It's a constant exploration of the unknown, trying to understand intelligence itself.
Absolutely. And as we go further, we need to be mindful of both the good things and the risks that come with it. It's a tricky balance, but it's super important to do this responsibly.
Couldn't agree more. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, maybe we should come back to something more concrete, like that partnership with Figure AI that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
What do you think that tells us about OpenAI's strategy?
Well, I think it shows they're not just about research. They're also looking for real-world applications, commercial opportunities.
So they're not just tinkering in a lab, they're actively trying to get these robots out in the world to see how they function in real-life situations.
Exactly. And by partnering with Figure AI, who's already working with big companies like BMW, they're getting a ton of experience and real-world data.
Smart move. It seems like OpenAI is serious about making a big impact in the robotics industry. They're not just dipping their toes in, they're diving right in.
And when you combine their AI knowledge with Figure AI's robotics experience, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. Could they develop robots that are even more adaptable, intelligent, and capable than anything we've seen before?
It's an exciting idea, but it does raise some concerns. If these robots are going to be working alongside humans in factories, warehouses, all kinds of places, we need to make sure they're safe, dependable, and ethically sound.
Yeah. Definitely. As we integrate robots into our workplaces and our lives, we have to think about the risks and how to minimize them.
We have to think about safety protocols, ethical guidelines, maybe even legal frameworks to make sure these robots are used responsibly and don't pose any danger to people.
It's a complicated issue, but it's one we can't ignore. We need open conversations about these challenges as we go forward.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about the social side of things too. The impact on jobs, on privacy, on how we relate to these machines, even what it means to be human in a world where robots are more and more common.
It's a challenge with many sides, but it's also a really exciting opportunity. We have a chance to shape how this technology develops and make sure it's used for good.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential upsides, the potential downsides, and the big questions that are still unanswered. But let's zoom out for a second and think about the historical context. Where does this all fit in with the big picture of artificial intelligence?
Well, in a lot of ways, this is the culmination of decades of research and development in AI. We've seen amazing progress in machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing, you name it.
And now, with this whole embodied AI thing coming up, we're seeing all that progress being applied to real-world robotics.
It's a turning point, a merging of different areas of AI research that's resulting in machines that can not only think, but act and interact with the physical world in increasingly complex ways.
It's like we're seeing a new chapter in the story of AI, one that's full of both promise and uncertainty.
And just like any new chapter, there will be obstacles and lessons to learn. But if we approach this technology with a sense of responsibility and a focus on ethical principles, we can harness its power to make a better future for everyone.
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here. From OpenAI's move into robotics to the bigger implications for society and the future of AI. What do you think? Any final thoughts before we move on?
We've explored the potential, the challenges, and the big questions. It's been quite a ride.
It really has. But before we wrap things up for today, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about robots potentially becoming more than just tools, maybe even partners or collaborators. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think as robots become more intelligent and capable, how we relate to them will change. We're already seeing this with things like voice assistants and smart home devices. But as robots become more physically present in our lives, those relationships will get even more complicated.
So instead of just giving robots orders, we might start to interact with them more like we do with other people, with understanding and maybe even empathy.
It's a really interesting idea, and it raises all sorts of ethical and philosophical questions.
So are we talking about like a future where robots are our buddies? Or even, I don't know, friends? Is that even possible?
Well, I guess it depends on what we mean by, friends. If we're talking about robots that can, keep us company, offer support, or even have real conversations with us, then yeah, I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility.
But could we ever, really form deep emotional connections with robots? Could we ever actually trust them the way we trust other humans?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. Some experts think that, as robots get better at mimicking human emotions and behaviors, we'll naturally start to feel attached to them.
But others argue that there's always going to be this fundamental difference between human relationships and human-robot relationships, that there's something special about human consciousness and empathy that you just can't replicate in a machine.
It's a super interesting debate, and one that'll probably keep going for a long time. But regardless of how you feel about that, it's pretty clear that as robots become more common in our lives, we're going to need to come up with new social rules and ethical guidelines for interacting with them.
It's like we're going to need a whole new set of social manners, right?
Yeah.
One that includes robots as well as humans.
Exactly. We'll have to think about things like, how we should treat robots, what rights they should have, and how to make sure they're not being taken advantage of or abused.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, but it's also pretty exciting to be living in a time like this. We're seeing the birth of a technology that could completely change our world in so many ways.
And like we've been talking about, it's a technology that comes with huge potential benefits and huge potential risks. It's up to all of us to make sure it's used for the right reasons and that it benefits everyone.
So for everyone listening out there, what do you think? Are you excited about the future of AI and robotics? What are your hopes and worries? We want to hear from you on social media because this is a conversation we need to be having on a global scale.
The future is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of AI and robotics. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep your minds open.
Stay curious.
And stay informed.